Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. This session is about materials, use of spoken interactions of native and non-native speakers. I hope and expect you would understand the nature of materials when they are taken from native and non-native contexts, and they are used in any language teaching context. What are the important aspects of that? The use of authentic texts is one of the major points that needs to be considered in this regard. So the user of English as a lingua franca needs to experience language as it is actually used in the real world where he or she lives, not as it is practiced in the idealized world of the typical course book dialogues. So authentic texts is one of the important aspects of the use of materials. The real life context, not the idealized context. And it should be the context of the learner, his or her social background, his or her social context, his or her real world where he or she operates. So when it comes to the learning of English, they are not learning English as a hobby or as an academic pursuit when it comes to learning of English as an international language or as a lingua franca. But they are, learning it as a vitally important means of participating in an international world where they need to interact with people from all across the globe. They need to be able to communicate with people from different cultures, from different backgrounds, and from, different contexts. This can be partially achieved by engaging the exposure to authentic spoken and written texts. What does it mean? It means that illustrations, that examples, that samples of materials should be provided from the real life authentic texts which would help them. When we come to the examples, such texts could be extracted from non-native speakers' literature in English, non-native speaker films in English, non-native speaker television programs in English. So, Indian English, or for example, Pakistani English programs, or Pakistani films, or Pakistani programs that are made in English, or Pakistani writings of novels, for example, that are written in English, for example, can be the resources, for example, in our context. English medium newspapers, because again they are localized and they are written in a particular local context, they form a very, very good source for that. But English medium newspapers from different non-native contexts can be used. Recorded and transcribed forms of interactions of non-native speakers can also be a source. Well, my dear students, meaningful engagement with authentic lingua franca texts is a prerequisite for the development of communicative skills, strategies, and competence that these learners of English as lingua franca is required. So the internet and the mobile phone offer great opportunities for materials, writers and teachers to find authentic lingua franca interactions that can be used in the classroom. And for students to interact with native and non-native speakers, again, these internet resources are a huge possibility. Apart from the authentic texts, now I move on to the use of authentic tasks. Definition of an authentic task is, it is a task which involves the learners in communicating to achieve an outcome rather than to practice the language. So, the learners need to be engaged in activities in the classroom which do not focus on the activities for the purpose of activities themselves or for the purpose of teaching language only or practicing language in those activities. Rather, the focus should be to perform something in language that they are supposed to or expected to perform in the real world. Examples of contexts of English as international language would include, for example, a foreign visitor seeking information or asking for directions or assistance from a local resident in a non-English speaking country. So, if a foreigner is visiting and is talking to you and asking for directions, he or she wants to reach somewhere, how would you speak to that person in English language? This can be an activity that can be carried out. On the same pattern, a foreign visitor giving directions to a local taxi driver in a non-English speaking country can be an activity that can be used. Another example is a foreign resident seeking and giving information to a local official in non-English speaking country. Furthermore, travelers from different countries interacting at an airport or in a plane or in a train while they're traveling, etc., can be the examples, and these kind of activities can be conducted in the classroom. Businessmen from different countries negotiating a contract, talking about a deal, etc., can also be carried out as an activity, for example, as a role play. Furthermore, examples include a foreign visitor or resident consulting a local doctor in a non-English speaking country, or an example can be the sports fans or the experts, commentators, etc., communicating in the context of an international sport event. One more example is of the delegates at an international conference discussing a presentation where, different people from different contexts would have gathered, and to these non-native speakers, you have to have conversations in English. Travelers booking flights, hotels, booking restaurants on the phone, on Skype or internet can be further activities that the teachers can exploit when it comes to using materials and activities for spoken interactions. Travelers communicating about arrangements for meetings, travels, for conferences, etc., would be another example of these kind of spoken interactions. The third important aspect of all this is the use of spoken interactions between non-native speakers. Possibilities of using, for example, a library of audio and video recordings of non-native speaker authentic interactions that can both be in the form of dialogues or in the form of groups, plus web references to other sources such as interactions both in real life and in films or in television programs. These are the huge possibilities that can be exploited. The fourth important aspect is learners' unstructured interaction. For example, persuading students to sign a contract, agreeing to speak only English to each other whenever they meet in the university or school or outside the school. So these kind of unstructured interactions would further help them learn to speak English in an international language classroom and outside the classroom context.